Welcome, Aussie Radfems, Kiwi Radfems, and international Radfems. How are you all doing this week? So I've put the link in the description box, so you should be. You should be able to get in from there. And the top chat's open, so I'll throw the link in there now. Okay, so that's that done. Hopefully there's a few people out there today. So this is the 5th live stream event, but only the 3rd one that's actually working. But we're getting there. We're getting there quite well. This week, a book was released. Actually, I think it was about 10 days ago in the UK. Sheila Jeffries released her latest work. And I'm just going to find the information on that so I can read it out to you. Here it is. It's called The Lesbian Revolution. And the blurb about the book is, the lesbian revolution argues that lesbian feminists were a vital force in the women's liberation movement. They did not just play a fundamental role in the important changes wrought by second wave feminism, but created a powerful revolution in lesbian theory, culture, and practice. Yet this lesbian revolution is undocumented. The book shows that lesbian feminists were founders of feminist institutions such as resources for women survivors of men's violence, including refuges and rape crisis centres, and they were central to campaigns against this violence. They created a feminist squatting movement, theatre groups, bands, art and poetry, and conducted campaigns for lesbian rights. They also created a profound and challenging analysis of sexuality, which has disappeared from the historical record. They analysed heterosexuality as a political institution, argued that lesbianism was a political choice for feminists, and indeed a form of resistance. Using interviews with prominent lesbian feminists from the time of the women's liberation movement and informed by the author's personal experience, this book aims to challenge the way the work and ideas of lesbian feminists have been eclipsed and document the lesbian revolution. This book will be of key interest to scholars and students of women's history, history of feminism, politics of sexuality, women's studies, gender studies, lesbian and gay studies, queer studies, and cultural studies, as well as the lay reader interested in the women's liberation movement and feminism more generally. So that's the blurb on the book. And because it mentions that she's talking from personal experience as well as interviewing other women, that we can expect that to have a London and Melbourne focus, given that she lived in London and in Melbourne, and I believe lives in London now. I could be wrong about that. But the table of contents is the introduction, the origins of lesbian feminism, lesbian culture, the lesbian perspective, separatism, political lesbianism and heterosexuality, sadomasochism, the challenge to the politics of sexual equality, the gender backlash, butch femme role-playing, identity politics and the destruction of lesbian feminism. The CIA couldn't have done it better. The demise of lesbian feminism and postscript. So that gives you an idea of the subject matter that she covers. Now, I'm not sure about an Australian distributor at this point in time, or a New Zealand distributor for that matter. The book has been released in the UK by a UK publisher. And as I said, it was only 10 days ago, so this is very, very new. I would say, just going by what I know of radical feminist literature and who usually publishes that, I would say keep an eye on Spinifex Press. This is Spinifex, Spinifex Press, which is owned by Susan Hawthorne and Renata Klein, both of whom are authors as well and radical feminist theorists. So they're most likely to be the publisher, though again, it could be a different publishing company. So I should actually find a link for them just in case people want to have a look at the other radical feminist literature that they have published over the last 20 years or so. I'll quickly do that, find Spinifex Press and put the link in for you. So do we have anybody here yet? Doesn't look like we've got anybody here. That's all right. I can talk. Yeah. Where are we? Spinifex Press. Found it. So I'll just get the link for that and put that in the description. Actually, I'll put it in the top chat. It's a lot easier than going to the description. Okay, so that's that. And let's find this book as well. I'm just Googling the book so that you can have a look for reviews. I can't imagine there'll be a lot yet. Put her name in. Here we go. I've just gone to the book depository because everything has to be in that. Okay, so got the link that's going into top chat or live chat. Sometimes it turns up and says top chat, other times it says live chat. So we've got 3 links in there. We've got the Hangouts so that you can actually get in and start talking to me, and Spinifex Press because they are a radical feminist publisher, and whether this book or not is going to be through them, at least you'll find other radical feminist books if you're not that one, and the book depository so you can read a bit about this book that's just been released by Sheila Jeffries. So for women who can't afford to buy books, there is a way of being able to get to read them. Most libraries in Australia have networks, and so there'll be anywhere between 4 and 10 libraries that share the books. And you can go in on either on your mobile phone or into the library itself. You log in, and then from there you can request books. And if there's enough requests for a book, let's say there's not many requests, but enough to say, oh yeah, people will read this, they will get 1 copy in, and that will be shared between those 4 to 10 or so libraries. So it's a way of supporting the author as well, of getting another sale of that book through the libraries, while at the same time not having to try and find money you don't have. So that's a bit of a tip for being able to get some radical feminist literature into your local library, and I think you can do that in New Zealand as well. So let's move on to a different topic. I was having a conversation online, and it was about these new urinals that are in public. You know, they're like public pit stops for men, because they say, oh yeah, we don't want men pissing on the streets, so we'll just put these in. And, you know, women have been stickering these things saying, get them the hell out. We don't want this in our public space. And, you know, I was having this conversation on there, and there was this guy saying, oh, this is, you know, Victorian era Puritanism. It's the hatefulness towards any kind of sexuality. And I pointed out to him, there's nothing sexual about elimination. You know, urine and feces is not sexual. It's the, you know, process of eliminating from your body. Now, you know, the bubonic plague was caused by urine and feces all over the streets. I don't think we want a repeat of that. And he was saying, oh, but it's natural, animals do it. Well, most animals, or many animals, will go somewhere private. They will secure the area first, check that there's no predators, because they don't want to be attacked and eaten while vulnerable. And many will cover with dirt the scent so that they can't be tracked by a predator. So there's nothing natural about pissing or shitting in public. In fact, it's quite natural to do the exact opposite because it represents danger to do it that way. But the arguments, you know, for why men should be able to, you know, shit on the streets, or sorry, piss on the streets, is just absolute madness. Oops, just turned off my camera so you can now see the little girl with her finger in the air flipping the bird at everyone. So we still don't have anybody here, so I might actually have to go into Facebook and let people know that it's happening. It's a shame that nobody's here, because one of the reasons that we really wanted to set this up was so that women could actually connect with each other across long distances, because Australia and New Zealand, though we're very isolated on this side of the world, we actually cover a lot of area space. You know, it can be a 9-hour flight to get from Melbourne to Perth. So we actually don't have very easy access to one another. And this is a way of being able to hear each other's voices and hear the intonation and inflection. So you get to hear it the right way, the way the person wanted something to be understood, rather than through text, which can be very cold and easy to misread. So part of this is about connection. Another part of it is about getting radical feminist theory and understandings out into the public sphere, so that people who have misunderstandings about it can hear what it really is. Because, you know, when I get online, what I see people saying about radical feminists who have never talked to one is, oh, you hate everyone, and, you know, you hate sexuality, and you're all prudes and pearl clutches, and you must all be white and middle class. And then, yeah, the misgivings about it are huge. And the misunderstandings are incredible. So I'm just going to get on to Facebook while this is happening and see if I can find where this post is, make an announcement. Here we go. Just typing in, live stream is happening. Please come and join me. It's so much better to have somebody else to bounce ideas off and to allow the conversation. So is there somebody else here? Dottie, hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? I don't know that you can hear me. I've been having a lot of technical difficulties.
Yeah, it is a little bit muffled, but I can hear you. So I'm imagining you might have to get up close to your computer so that I can hear it clearly.
Yeah, I think covering my camera covers my microphone as well.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, it depends what you're covering it with. I'm using a tiny bit of tape that's just actually pink tape.
I've just got a tissue, but I don't actually know where the microphone is on my machine, so.
Oh, okay.
It could be anywhere. Is that better?
Yeah, it's good. I can hear you really clearly now, so I'm guessing other people can as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, are you in Australia or New Zealand?
I'm in Australia, in Ballarat.
Oh, okay. I'm in Victoria as well, but around 2 hours out the other direction.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's cold both places, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, the sun's just come out now, and I'm like, perfect time to go outside.
No, I'm all for the abolishing public pissing.
Yeah, so am I.
It disgusts me, actually. It's just another way for males to dominate and show their dicks off. It's like monkeys throwing shit.
Yeah, marking territory.
Yeah.
You know, what are you going to do? How can you stop me kind of attitude? And I can't help thinking, why don't we have huge fines for doing this? You know, if it hits them in the pocket, then they'll stop.
I can't imagine the shop holders want them.
No. Oh, I saw something brilliant. There's paint that actually has a kind of reflective quality that if somebody pisses on it, it actually splashes them.
Brilliant.
I just can't wait for people to catch on to that one and have it over every shop, and men will stop because they don't want that on them.
I don't know what I was watching the other night, or whether it was on the computer or whether it was on the TV or not, but it was some cop came along and said, "Oh, pisser," stopped and pulled the guy up. He was pissing up against the wall, and in no
Right.
uncertain terms was saying, "Nobody wants to smell your piss. You want this place to be a toilet." So supposedly these public urinal things are, or the, well, they're not public toilets. They're basically piss points on the street.
Yeah.
Apparently, that's supposed to take care of that problem. So you just kind of isolate the spot that smells like piss, I guess.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
It is.
You know, and do we really want men whipping out their dicks in front of anyone and everyone?
No,
You know,
we don't.
gross. I
But
mean, even if it has some kind of privacy where you can't see that, there's still this smell radiating across the street, which it can't be healthy.
no.
You know, and think of that going in the air with, you know, on a hot day.
Yeah.
It's just,
It wasn't a woman who came up with it. I would very much doubt that it was a woman who came up with the idea.
oh, you never know. I mean,
That's true.
I always thought, you know, no, it won't have been a woman who's done this, that, or the other thing. But you look at, you know, women just playing into the dominant narratives and not thinking beyond that.
Yeah. Have you seen this this thing that's gone on in Manchester, at the Pride, at Manchester Pride, where the compere said that they should have dragged the London protesters at Pride. They should have dragged them out by their saggy tits.
Oh my God, no, I didn't see that. I knew that there was a lot of backlash, you know, against lesbians and lesbian rights,
Yeah.
but I didn't know that they were using that kind of misogyny.
Well, this was the guy on stage who was giving the award to Lesbians Stand by Your Trans Award.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, lesbians have got to support everybody, but nobody has to give that back to them.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
but the really good thing about it is, and this guy doubled down. He emphasized the insult online on Twitter, and the great thing about it is that of the hundreds of replies that he got, there were like 2 in support.
Wow.
I think there's like a tipping point happening.
Oh, thank goodness for that, because we've been needing some kind of, I guess, en masse opposition. And
Absolutely.
I think there's so many women out there who can see through this, but they feel like they're isolated and alone, so they
Yeah,
don't speak.
that's right. I know I've been afraid on my, my personal timeline to talk about things, and a lot of the fear for me about talking about it isn't about whether or not I believe I'm in the right, or I have my opinions. That's fine, but it's the women that I came up with, that I learned feminism from, that have actually swallowed this line, and it's breaking with people who have been really substantial pillars in my life, that makes me fearful.
Yeah. There's women that I've known, you know, as feminists all my life. And, well, you know, they're falling for this liberal feminist dogma, hook, line, and sinker, to the point that I even had one when I was talking about women's rights issues in regards to trans activism, who called it word salad. And I'm like, your inability to comprehend it does not make it word salad. What
Exactly.
here is you've had one narrative, one, dominant narrative. And as soon as you, get challenged with that narrative, your mind is using confirmation bias.
Yep. Yep.
Hi, Virginia Brown. How are you?
Hello, Virginia.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, we've got the video playing in the background. I'm guessing that's you, Virginia. Yeah, so if you pause the video, then it won't have that background noise.
Hi. Yeah, we've got the
There we go.
No, she left. Oh,
well, I hope she comes back.
she'll figure it out. She's having the same problems I was, I think.
Yeah, the first time I tried to join a live stream, I failed abysmally. And the first time I tried to run a live stream, I failed abysmally. I'd say, if you're still there, just try again. That's fine, Yeah, what happens is you have two screens up. The one that is showing, that says live stream event 5 Sunday 2nd September, that you just put on pause and then keep the other one up, and that's where you get to hear and speak in real time.
The Google Hangouts one.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. Pause the YouTube one and open the
Keep the Google Hangout
Hangouts.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go for it. It's okay.
I was just, this has been going on a very long time. I've never been able to understand the idea of trans. Even when it was transgender, I've always been saying, but how can they know what a woman is? And I've said this. I remember the first time I said it out loud to a friend of mine who was a feminist. Said, well, you need to get your shit together and figure it out. And I was just so taken back by the idea that that question wasn't allowed.
Yeah.
And so it's, I've kept it's still going in my head. It always has been from the very beginning. There's the whole idea of what's a woman? How can you possibly think you're a woman? And no one can ever answer that question. And it remains the fundamental flaw in the argument.
It does.
That no one will answer. And I think maybe if I don't know, if we can emphasize that you cannot answer this question, how can you have an argument? But it's what you were saying, the confirmation bias.
Yeah, it is very much confirmation bias, because if you're only listening to one narrative, a different narrative sounds foreign and wrong automatically.
Yeah. And I think the fact is that one of our friends is intersex and had gone through horrible, was surgically castrated at birth, and the horrible things that they did to children. And her parents decided she was her for the longest time, but finally, had surgery and such to reconcile her DNA with her body, which I completely understood.
So she's female then, yeah?
Yeah, her genetics were male, and now she's had surgery to reconstruct her maleness.
Oh, okay. So they made him into
her at birth.
Right.
So that confirmation bias that you're talking about, because they have this example of this person with intersex they're conflating it, and their automatic response is to defend that person, even though it doesn't make sense in that context.
Yeah, I do understand. I've got a friend who was born X0, and I can't remember the correct medical name for that condition. But basically, the first X is carried through from the mother, but the second genetic pairing didn't come from the father at all. So it's an empty space. It affects very, very few people. And
it's not Fragile X syndrome, is it? Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that doesn't sound familiar. I'd know it if I heard it because she's told me a few times. But yeah, they're born mostly with like webbed fingers and toes, very short. Usually get to a height above like 4'5". That's like considered the tallest of you know, that you're going to get if you have that genetic anomaly.
Yeah.
And then sort of guild-like necks. So all of that had to be surgically altered. Then when puberty hits, there is no puberty. It doesn't happen.
I see. Yeah.
That's the moment at which the person has to decide, are you going to be male or female? Because they can do drugs to create a false puberty. And she decided that she was a girl.
Yeah.
In this particular case, genetically, neither male or female. It's one of the very few that doesn't have an absolute. And it's been right for her. And she also had her legs broken to then try and get more bone growth over and over.
God, yeah.
Yeah, then there's the other problems of they tend to have weak kidney and weak liver that then has problems down the track. So, you know, special diets and having to look after the health from the day you're born to the day you die to make sure that those genetic problems don't happen. And knowing her, just seeing how much shit she's had to go through and how strong she's had to be.
Yeah.
And how much self-control and discipline has had to go into protecting her health long term. I get angry as fuck when I hear trans activists appropriating intersex.
I know. Yes.
You know, and I've even had an argument with one of them online where I was saying, can you imagine what it'd be like to go through all of that and to have the dominant narratives about your lived experience coming from people who've never freaking had it?
It's because they can't find a way to make themselves victims otherwise. They appropriate people of color. They appropriate intersex people and people with other genetic problems. They just cannot fathom. It's the whole MRA thing where men have become the victims in their own minds. And this is just a way that they've decided to justify it. And the whole idea that this is not conversion therapy. It's to have gay men standing up and saying something about that, like drag them up by their saggy tits, and defend the trans men who are basically denying their sexuality. And you'll stand up for them, but not the lesbians who are fighting for you. Once again, it's like smacking the women who, you know, held the hands of gay men dying in the AIDS crisis and smacking their face for, I don't know, not being a right-wing nut or something.
Yeah. Hi, Felicity. How are you?
Not bad. Yourself?
Good. Yeah, thanks for joining us. I don't know if you caught where we're at, but we're just talking about the trans appropriating others' experiences and how many gay men are defending trans at mostly lesbian women's expense.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I'm a lesbian, and it's so funny. My gay male friends think that they're being virtuous in supporting the trans ideology, but then they think that I'm the insane one for wanting my sexual consent, which is a really funny situation to be in, but very sad.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I did see one article from a gay man on Feminist Current, actually, and he was saying it's time for gay men to actually stand next to lesbians and support the right to have a sexual orientation.
I think that might be because they see that it might work against them as well.
Most likely, yeah.
Because
I don't know about this particular author and who he is and what he's like, but yeah, I can see how gay men would instantly think, hang on, if this is happening to lesbians, it's going to happen to us soon.
Yeah. Well, it is in great numbers. I mean, I cannot for the life of me think that most of these children that are being transed, I'm in quotes, are not gay and lesbian that are being converted.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's a religion or it's the trans cult, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and it's causing massive lesbian erasure, because when a lesbian transitions to male, her lesbian partner then has to identify as bisexual for that relationship to be maintained. So that erases lesbians on two fronts.
Yep.
Yeah, I had a trans individual tell me once on Facebook Messenger that that me presenting in a butch sense was great, because it meant that you know, he felt in common with me, which made me feel really uncomfortable, because it was essentially saying that you know, women who present as butch or who are butch lesbians, the trans community, I guess, sees that as like a gender non-conforming thing, and therefore kind of pro-trans. And so for me, it was just like, well, actually, no, presenting butch is just not accepting femininity. It's not changing my gender. So it's a completely different thing. And so there's, like, you know, very concerning things around that.
I always think of my gender as being comfortable. That's my gender, comfortable. I wear whatever feels comfortable. I wear my hair however it's comfortable. It's not getting in my eyes, then I'm happy. You know, gender is such massive bullshit. And it always reminds me of a conversation I had with a gay man who asked me why lesbians all look like men. And I said to him, because that's what women look like when they don't perform for men, when they don't put on gender stereotypes.
Good point. It is. Yeah, I find it concerning that people from the, you know, I guess the rainbow alphabet trans activist side would think that gender nonconformity means that being, you know, for all of this new language and erasing of women's rights and erasing of lesbianism, because, you know, cis doesn't work as a title for women who do not gender conform. And, you know, being lesbian automatically means you're not conforming to gender, because the gender stereotype is to make yourself available for men. Yeah. And yet there's no place in this language for women who say, well, I like my female body. I understand what that means in this world. And that is an understanding I'm not comfortable with at all. And then as far as the role is concerned and the presentation is concerned, that is also troubling.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, on top of that also is that, I've never met a female, maybe you have, but I'd be surprised, but I've never met a female who 100% of the time is 100% comfortable with herself. And so therefore, the trans ideology will make women believe who aren't feeling comfortable with their bodies, or who aren't feeling comfortable with themselves, which is a normal part of being human, that, they're, dysmorphic, or they, should transition, or something. So instead of being a conversation about self-esteem or self-love or self-worth or anything like that, it's a conversation of, well, what hormones can you now take, or what differences in how you present yourself can you do now. And so it is actually going against what I was brought up with. I'm 23, and I was brought up with the message of loving yourself and loving who you are, and all of that sort of stuff. And now it's like, well, love yourself, but if you don't love yourself, then it's a hormonal change, and we've got to put blockers on you, and you've got to have all of these things happening to you, rather than learning to accept one's body and learning to accept how things is. And I think that's the fundamental change in the attitude now, anyway.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that people are being sold a pup in that they're, most people hear this and they go, good, finally, let's, let everybody be what they are. And it sounds really good that maybe, we're breaking out of this male dominance kind of role. But the exact opposite is what is happening. It's being reinforced. But people are seeing it because on first glance, it looks like that we're busting down the patriarchy when we're actually building it up.
Yeah. I'm Generation X, and so I got to see, the first wave of this huge body dysmorphia thing that came out as anorexia, bulimia, and heroin addiction.
Yeah.
And I can't.
Yeah.
It's just morphed from starving yourself or throwing up a lot or doing drugs in order to go with that old saying that used to be around, are you a boy or a girl? Yes. To saying, oh, I must be the opposite gender if I'm comfortable. And this phase of not feeling comfortable affects every single generation through puberty, young adulthood, and even sometimes into mature adulthood.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet we, feed these kids on a diet of hormone blockers and this, odd, way of doing things. Like, and on the opposite side, like, if I have a male friend who, I don't know, likes to wear nail polish, he's just a guy, or my male friend who just likes to wear nail polish. He isn't questioning his gender identity.
Right.
Like it's not, I don't care if you want to wear nail polish as a male or whatever. I don't care. Similarly, if you if you want to, and like, for goodness sakes, like, David Bowie, like David Bowie completely changed the way, the masculine was presented. So did Prince, so did Michael Jackson.
Boy George.
Yeah, but in today's society, all of those men would be like, oh no, you've got to transition, right? You've got to say that you're a female because you like, to do things that isn't, stereotypically masculine. And similarly in the other way, there's, women who have, been great, in terms of, actually pushing the boundaries. And the left now is so obsessed with putting people into boxes, whereas the left mindset used to be actually break out of them, you know. But now it's just like, oh, you have to conform to whatever the stereotype is.
Yep.
Yeah, and why is society so afraid of men who present more interestingly than the caricature in either jeans and a tee or a suit with shorts, you know, side and back? It's just, it's insane, because masculinity has been, you know, pretty much the bane of men's existence. If you actually, you know, listen to people like Jackson Katz, and I've listened to him a lot, and he's talked about this crushing weight of it and how it changes behavior, and how that's the cause of aggression. You know, that it comes out as the only way that a man can express. So we've got these men who are now expressing in a wide, wide range of ways, being pigeonholed into the woman role.
Yeah.
And it's going to be another form of oppression, because it's just another cage.
Yeah. And I think the butch femme divide in lesbian culture and understanding where it came from makes good sense. But there was a point in the 90s where that film Go Fish came out, and it was just hailed as all things great about lesbian film. Oh, thank God we made this film. And it was horrible. I walked out of it. It was about lesbians making over a butch lesbian so that she looked the right way in order to get laid.
Yeah, I saw it too, and like, I think I lasted no joke, about 30 minutes, and I turned it off.
Yeah.
It just infuriated me. Like, women, you know, I don't know if you've seen that book about like male female chauvinists, females who you know, will do everything in their power to uphold the patriarchy.
Yeah.
You know, forcing women
Female
to,
chauvinist.
yeah, exactly. And women who will you know, enforce pressure of other women to, you know, get fake nails or shave, or to you know, do all of these sorts of things just so she can be rewarded by men to make other women submit to them.
Yeah.
And so for me, as a young female, in a culture of the selfie culture and the culture of the I want it now kind of thing.
I am so sorry for you. I'm serious. I could not be your age in this day and age.
But you know, for me, females that act like that is far more of a concern than men, to be honest, because women say that they're feminists, and they say that they're you know, pro-female, you know, whatever that means now, but often the case that they're really men's rights activists, right? So they believe that men should be able to watch porn or have sex workers, or to expect that women will just accept these things. Like, you know, I'm sorry, when did feminism become a movement to make men comfortable? When
Sometime in the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah, like when did that when did saying you're a feminist equal, well, I'm pro everything that men wanted me to be pro? You know, it's ridiculous to me as a young person. It's just like, no, feminism is about a women's liberation, and it's about a women's understanding of the politics that is around her. It's not anything to do with like what a man will say, oh, well, thank you, honey, for agreeing with me. Like, come on, it's not the 1950s. Like, get over it, you know.
Yeah, I personally believe that what happened was my generation wanted to find a rebellion against our parents' generation. So we're looking at Gen X against the second wave boomers. So what happened was we started flipping the narrative. and saying, well, actually, if I want to be sexy, I can be. And, you know, this is happening at the time of puberty, of getting interested in sexual relationships. There was a blurring of, you know, male and female, and it went into this whole androgynous thing. That was like the coolest thing you could be, was androgynous, you know. And then there was also this blurring of orientation where everybody was trying out bisexuality. And I think it really went from there, where the next generation, Gen Y and millennials, have taken this to become feminist politics as opposed to young people rebelling against their parents, because we didn't call it feminism back then.
Well, and the timing too is that while this was also not just in reaction to the parents, but there was a horrible, horrible backlash going on in the media and in the academia to second wave feminism. Susan Faludi, wasn't it, that wrote Backlash? But there was a horrible backlash to women, and it was the harridans, the screeching shrews, the, you know, and the feminazis. That was all coined during that time. And so I think there was a lot of effort put in to not fit the stereotypes that the right was imposing on feminism.
So this is interesting, because as a young person, I have a totally different analysis on like why the shift happened. And my sort of, you'll probably disagree, probably, I don't know, but I blame the change on the 80s. The 80s was a hugely different culture to the 70s and the 60s.
Yes.
The 70s,
that's what I was saying, that it was the 80s and 90s. Yeah. So
yes.
But I think it's not necessarily a cultural thing. So I think it's actually the 80s was really when neoliberalism and capitalism became a huge part of our culture.
Yep.
And so we started focusing on the individual far more than we focused on communities. The 80s was a time of uber amounts of commercialism, and this idea of getting rich, and this sort of individual thing. You know, things became far more disassociated from family groups, from religious groups or community groups or whatever. It became more about, you know, what you can do in the workplace, and you know, being some hotshot in your field, and all that sort of stuff. And so therefore women, I feel then looked at this and looked at the amazing things that men were getting out of capitalism, and thought, well, you know, if we just, you know, acted a lot like the men, supported the men, became part of this boys club, then we'll also become hotshots and we'll also have that success. But what happened was that the women did this, which, you know, is up to them, but also the narrative of women being able to have it all became a thing. And what became a thing was that women were not just expected to be a hotshot lawyer or a hotshot in their corporate sense. They were also expected to be the great soccer mum, and you know, they were expected to do all the household chores. So essentially, women picked up two forms of labor. They were picking up this corporatism, and they're also picking up the unpaid labor domestically. And so women became very disassociated from their families and disassociated from their broader communities, because of the pressure that society was placing upon women, that they weren't placing on men. Right? Men just had to be, you know, that hot shot, you know, in their corporation or something, but you know, they weren't then being pressured to break the gender divide, or they weren't being pressured to pick up the domestic labor or anything. That was still, quote, women's work. So
I think
I couldn't agree with you
more than my generation, because like we used to laugh at all that shit. We were like, oh my God, they, you know, want us to go corporate. Fuck this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an absolute rebellion against all of that for Gen X. So I think that's like the older boomers and, having the second wave, and then the younger boomers having this women can have it all, and more to the point, women have to do it all.
Yeah.
I think, well, I consider myself a member of Generation Jones, which is, born in the early 60s.
Right.
And we watched, all this revolution happening around us, but we were too young to participate. And I saw what you have to remember in any generational shift is we tend to talk about generations like they're monolithic, but generations are as divided within themselves as they are from other generations. Yes, there was the hippie movement, but most of the people in the country were deriding the hippies. And yes, there was the feminist movement, but the establishment was completely deriding the feminist movement. And as many women were anti-feminist in the second wave, as more women were anti-feminist in the second wave than were feminists. And we talk about how things changed by talking about the people who made the change, but the rest of the culture didn't ride that wave. And I think a lot of times it's the combination or how things work out between the people who are making the change and the compromises that get made between those people, the majority often, who are not willing to make any change, and the ones who are making change. And I think that's what happened with second wave and the corporate ladder. It's like, okay, we've made these changes. We understand that we can do anything we want. Well, what's available to want? And all there was as a template was corporate male ways of being. And I think that was the compromise between the people who didn't want change and the people who did.
But maybe I'm grossly uneducated, and maybe I'm
good
really
God,
confused.
no, not from the way you're talking.
But like I would have understood second wave feminism to be the feminism of the 60s and 70s, and then the third wave stuff started really in mid-80s. No?
Yeah.
So like when you say second wave feminists weren't, maybe I'm misunderstanding you. But from like how I'm hearing you is like you're saying that the second wave is sort of broke the difference, or maybe I don't know, am I completely wrong in my understanding of what you're saying?
I think second wavers broke some really basic hardcore walls down. I mean,
Right,
you got to
okay.
remember that people, there were laws up until the 80s where women couldn't have credit cards without their husband signing. There were, you couldn't have a job unless your husband said it was okay. You couldn't own your own property in lots of places. This is things that we take for granted right now. We're not taking for granted in the 60s. They weren't even thought of a lot of the time until women started the second wave and started bashing these things down. And I think it asks a lot of the second wave to have envisioned, the entire future in front of them when they were working on things as basic as the right to autonomy outside of the home.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one thing I think that your two generations would share that mine doesn't so much, because you're both from generations of high birth rates, baby booms, both the, boomers and the Gen Y. There was high birth rates, whereas I'm from the smallest generation in history with the low birth rates. So I think there's a lot less diversity in my generation.
Well, and also your generation was the first generation in Western history to have lower expectations than their parents.
Yeah, And we've also only had 50% of Gen X women here, and 49 or 48% in the Asian countries have actually had children.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we rejected a hell of a lot of stuff, and we were very much influenced by that second wave, while at the same time being the, in some ways the catalyst of this third wave, which I find really interesting because we didn't foresee what was happening,
No, exactly. I was there and I didn't,
Also, I think
in the
that
80s, I was in my 20s. So,
yeah, I think there's also, the similarity in that, I feel very much that my generation, I don't know if I'm optimistic, but I sort of can smell the revolution in the air again.
yes.
And I sort of feel of that kind of real kind of wanting to question things, wanting to rebel against someone or something somewhere, and that real sense of urgency, and therefore that's a feeling I don't think baby boomers had, because things were pretty good.
Oh no, I don't think that's true at all.
Well, baby boomers, I don't know, maybe it's difference in country, but baby boomers tend to have more property here in Australia. They've got to have education far freer. And so it was a situation of low house prices, rent was really low, and jobs were pretty easy to get.
For men, that was the case.
Yeah.
Sure.
And you got to remember the hippies, the sexual revolution, I guess, which was a big crock, and feminism were boomers. Like I said, I don't feel like there's the baby boomers and the baby busters, and I feel, and the population started slowing down its birth rate. I'm part of that, but there definitely was dissatisfaction in that. I mean, we had, in the States where I'm from, we had the civil rights movement and the women's movement and gay liberation movement at the time. And we had hippies who were bucking the capitalist status quo. Now, the fact that the hippies didn't win and that boomers went on, like I said, half of any movement is not the majority by definition. If you're trying to change things, you're the minority.
Yeah, my mum was a second wave radical feminist when she was younger. She was born in 1949. And when she started work, there wasn't pay parity yet. So we paid something like around 60% of men. It was really low. And so, rents weren't cheap. She said she lived in a boarding house with other girls and they shared rooms because they couldn't afford a room each. So that situation is what is happening now as well. If you look at the rents and what people are earning who don't own homes, a lot of people are sharing 2 to 4 people in one bedroom.
Yeah.
So this is actually something that's come back round for women, but it's not what was happening for men. And I think we've got to remember that it's, the dominant narrative is the male perspective, and it doesn't apply to women all the time.
Yeah. But I understand what you're saying about the economic differences. That makes perfect sense. I'm getting a lot of feedback.
From who?
No, on my machine. I'm getting my own voice feeding back on me. I'm hearing.
Oh, okay. It's clear at my end. I can hear you without feedback.
And I can hear you without feedback. It's just me feeding back on myself, I think. But no, Felicity, I understand what you're saying, and I think that's really valid. I just think that as a force turning feminism into liberal feminism.
But liberal feminism like shrines and becomes very popular when neoliberalism is the dominant force, because neoliberalism and liberal feminism are like brothers and sisters. You know, they're both the same, and therefore, when we have a strong anti-capitalist movement, or a movement that is questioning the economic system, I think radical feminism or a second wave feminism will become like a second nature thing. So for me, it's just like, well, because I'm also a Marxist, and so a lot of my analysis is from a class-based system. And so for me, like, you know, we can question, you know, liberal feminism, but liberal feminism is like the social application of neoliberalism in the economic version. And so when we have a situation where, you know, corporations and mass industries make so much money from things like porn, then it's no wonder that a lot of new liberal feminists want to defend porn, because liberal feminists don't want to question society, or they don't want to question anything. They're just in it for the money, right? They're in it for capital.
Right.
And so therefore, when you know, I think if there's a strong anti-capitalist message, and I think that's starting up with the youth again, I hope, that, you know, hopefully the tide will start turning, and women will, you know, start sort of saying, actually, no, you don't have a right to view, you know, my body, and no, actually, you know, we have a right to defend our spaces, and actually, you know, all of those sorts of stuff. But I don't think that will happen if women and men alike start, you know, ramping up the whole Reaganomic kind of idea, because when you focus on that sort of stuff, you become, you know, all your social view, or all your wants socially become what can, you know, make me look more appealing for capital. And so for me, I cling to that hope that with a revolutionary scent in the air, I then hope that the radical version of feminism, which is anti-capitalist in nature, which is questioning of class, then that will become the dominant form again. But we're just hoping.
Gail Dines has done a lot of work on looking at the links of neoliberalism, stemming back to I think 1979 through the early 80s with Thatcherism and Reaganism, bringing in neoliberalism to break down the unions and benefit big business, both national and multinational, and how it was picked up through the left on the level of individualism through expression. And also my own kind of addition to that would be if you look at the rise of New Age spiritualism, which started somewhere around the 90s, and paganism, and that was also the rise of the individual, where, you know, what you think is what you manifest, and you know, positive affirmations and all that stuff.
And that was also the beginning of men taking over feminism.
Yeah, yes, it was. And this shift that then turned into, from the personal, it became a neoliberal political on the left. So you've got neoliberalism right wing, you've got neoliberalism left wing, and then you've got centre right and centre left that actually now have more in common with each other than the right does with the alt-right and the left does with the alt-left. And how now you've got younger people who are saying that I don't want to associate with the dominant narrative because it's all sex positive and I've got to get my tits out, and I'm meant to fuck everybody who comes near me, and I don't want to do any of that. And they think that the way to oppose this is to go with a conservative values, and they don't. So I think part of what we need to do is to open up that door and say, look, there's actually a way of being progressive for real, as opposed to this neoliberal idea of progressiveness, which is actually regressing backwards.
Yeah.
And it's probably the most deeply conservative stance you could take. But actually open that door and say, well, look, here's all the other ways you can rebel against this mainstream narrative that's trying to suck you down a woman as sexual object and pretty thing to look at.
I think that's really well said. I immediately think of the Bernie bros who think that they're combating neoliberalism by being neoliberalists. Bernie bros to me is just a term for, all the guys who think they are so woke.
Oh, the right on dudes, yeah.
Yeah.
Bernie bros, right on, woke dudes.
Yeah, we know what's best, and it's not you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
like
I just love it when men explain feminism.
Well, that's the exact thing, it's hilarious to me, so we have these MRA types, because I spend quite a lot of time sort of keeping an eye on MRA kind of groups. I'm in Women Against Feminism and MRA groups on Facebook, not because I'm subscribing to them, but I find it hilarious just to
know
watch.
thy enemy.
Yeah. And it's really funny, you'll have threads that go, women are too stupid to go into politics, and women shouldn't get involved with anything other than having kids and staying at home because they're stupid, blah blah blah. And then literally next, and then they'll say, oh, men should be part of the politic, and men should rule the world, and blah blah. And then literally next minute, the judicial system, the state hates me. It's just well, not women. If
I'm losing you.
Yeah, it's just it's not women who are forcing you to do anything. It's the men that you believe should be empowered doing that. And it's just crazy. It's crazy because in my generation, you'll have situations where young quote feminists are okay with war and okay with cutting of massive amounts of money from resources like healthcare and education if a woman's doing it. It's just we have to have a female prime minister or a female president because that shows diversity and shows feminism. But Clinton would have killed far more Muslim women or third world women.
Oh, now you're talking Bernie bro talk.
Yeah, it's just it's nothing to do with she could, a leader can be a male and female, but they're still going to hate the working class. They're still going to hate any sort of feminism that questions capital. They're still going to support men. And so this idea that a lot of my generation have, and a lot of my generation are very Bernie bro mindset. That's the funny thing for me. It's this idea that it's what I call pink imperialism, right? It's this idea that it's okay for it's I don't understand why Bernie bro people don't support people like Thatcher. She was a woman, strong woman, doing her job, going in and blah,
I think
blah,
you've got things confused a bit. The Bernie bros hated Hillary.
No, not in the mindset of a lot of Australians during that election. A lot of my friends and stuff would say, oh, we support Bernie, but he's got no chance, so therefore I really love Hillary. It wasn't a conversation of Hillary is establishment, so therefore we're going to support Bernie. It was Bernie is great and we love him, but he's got no chance, so Hillary has got to have our vote or our support.
To address your point of neoliberal feminism doing a top-down kind of trickle-down feminism, it's like the trickle-down economics of Rogernomics, where it's meant to be if the wealthy have, if input of huge amounts of money are given to the wealthy, it'll trickle down, that theory. I would say that's where it comes from, this idea that if we have women in positions of power, then that's going to trickle down and it's going to give power to women at the bottom, which we know is a load of shit on both fronts, socioeconomic and liberation. And that's the thing that I think we need to get through to these neoliberal feminists is what Gail Dines, again, I'm going to quote her, she says, that she's one of the most empowered women on the face of the planet. She's got the education, the good income. She's white, and so she doesn't suffer racism. She's got tenure and all of these other things. But that means nothing to the woman who cleans the room that she's just given a lecture in. Yeah. We need to get this across that it's grassroots, bottom up is the way to go.
Yes.
Is very much fighting against right-wing ideas that got brought in and then taken over by the left.
Oh, this is so fraught. And it's a conversation I've had so many times, I really can't keep into it because it always ends up in anger, and I'm just not. Oh, it's, yeah, I think I'll hold off. Sorry, I'm not trying to be obtuse, but I've had this argument. It's a purity argument. It's do we support women getting into office who are imperfect to us? And trickle down. I understand the idea of the trickle down, but until we have women who are comfortable, I mean, it was such a stark difference that I saw. There was a woman who was talking about this latest labor woman who stepped down because of the bullying, and there was a labor woman or liberal woman stepped down. Labor woman was talking about that if this kind of thing happened in the Labor Party, it would be staunched right then. You call up Tanya or you would call up Penny, and the shit would be hit on the head with a hammer. And I don't think you get that kind of situation where you have that feeling of comfort for women in the party without having lots of women in the party. And you can't have lots of women in the party if you are going to make sure that every woman you include is pure.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that women should be opting out, like of the general political system.
See, I wouldn't agree with that either.
Absolutely, I wouldn't.
In politics. However, I feel like the radical feminist focus needs to start with empowering women at the absolute freaking bottom.
Yes.
Rather than pouring our attention and energy into the top. Like, yes, sure, if women want to rise up to the top and try and influence infrastructure and politics, please be my guest, go for it. But my personal focus is who's suffering the most and how can we change that?
I think, this is once again one of those arguments that comes around all the time. In its most basic form, I always think of it in terms of the Dykes on Bikes versus the Human Rights Campaign. And it's the people, you have to have people working at all levels to make change. If you only had the Dykes on Bikes, lesbians were never going to get rights. If you only had the Human Rights Campaign, no one was ever going to get rights. You need people on all those levels working all those angles in order to make real and lasting change. And I think you have to work grassroots to build that support from the bottom up, absolutely. But you also need people running for office who can start translating that growing groundswell into legislation and real changes on the political landscape, as well as the personal landscapes of individual lives.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
because we're only at the bottom, working at the bottom, and there's nobody actually in positions of power to make change, then we're in a position of begging men to perceive as human.
Yeah.
no, I don't think, like, I'll make my position a little bit more clear. So for sure, I believe that, for, all people who are oppressed in any what way, women, people of color, Indigenous people, like, people across the board should be, getting involved with their local politics, and they should be doing all of that work for sure. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I'm also saying that, I ultimately think that the system as a whole is completely corrupt, and it's corrupt, and it's ultimately against the working class, and it's ultimately against other oppressed groups. So for me anyway, I'd much rather, for example, someone not to try and get a seat in parliament, but maybe get more people to, actually join up with grassroots groups that actually can sway votes, that actually can stop things, can protest, can get on the streets, because ultimately, yes, we can get, a parliament, for example, full of, I don't know, for, lack of a better argument, black females or lesbians or whatever, and we have no, like, white men in sight, but because of the power and the way that power corrupts people, we don't know for sure that even the best of our representation will then just be corrupted and swayed by money. So I'm sort of a fan of, like, yes, we need representation or democracy, but at the same sort of sense, I think that women should be then going and saying, look, I'm going to opt out. I'm going to opt out of doing things for men. I'm not going to shave anymore. I'm not going to get married to a guy. I'm not going to have a relationship with a guy. I'm just going to fully focus my energy on liberating women. And I can't do that if I'm forcing women to do things just so I can get power, or just so I can, advance my career, or just so I can maintain my dominance. Women need to start opting out, and start opting out, boycotting, for lack of a better word. Like, we should be starting a movement saying boycotting boys. Like, why do women, seem to be so obsessed with going to the polls, like, what, every 4 years, but in Australia every 6 months. I joke, but going to the polls and ticking off on a box for someone is not doing anything. Right? We need to start thinking about social movements again, and social movements that demanded, that boycotted, that got on the streets, that did sit-ins, that made life for these corrupt politicians unbearable. We should be doing far more of that, far more political lesbianism, far more sort of direct action than just getting more of our kind of people into power, because it's not going to do anything.
But
partially agree with you and partially disagree with you, but I'll let Dottie speak first.
Oh, that's all right. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. The partial agreement that I have is that, yeah, power corrupts. You see women getting into positions of power and then towing the line of the established status quo, and often will, hold the belief that there's only a certain number of positions for women, and so they hold other women down rather than raise them up. and they won't bring in women's issues for fear of being called, a feminist, or even, what do they call it, misandrist. So they'll have this thing where they have to be one of the boys in order to be there, and that's not useful. But the bit that I disagree with is that, women should all become political lesbians and, remove any kind of association with men, because I think men are the ones who have to change. I don't think women have to change as much. There's certain things that, yes, we need to undermine the beauty myth that was outlined by Naomi Wolf and the backlash that Susan Faludi foresaw. However, to me, all of those things, all of the ways in which women are right now trying to kowtow to the male gaze, is only a problem because it's mandated. None of those practices in and of themselves are a problem if the option to do the opposite were equally valued. So, I'd look at that and see it as a valid choice if there were no pressure applied. And I see relationships with men as a valid choice so long as no pressure is applied. Mm-hmm. Now, we're not in a society where there's no pressure. So that's another, I guess it's a spanner in the works of political lesbianism, because you're looking at women who may be pressured into a marriage because they got pregnant. You're looking at heteronormativity that's been imposed on girls before they've even worked out what their orientation is. You've got sexual slavery happening across the world. And most of the time, this is happening to girls prior to the age that they even reach puberty. And for some, it'll happen just after, but they're certainly not adults yet. And again, that interferes with the process of discovering one's orientation. So we've got all of these things happening. We've got to work with it. So I don't see telling women, you've got to do this, we should be doing that, is useful, because each woman has to deal with these sets of circumstances in her life and manage them, which alters the shoulds and cans.
I think I have opted as far out of male society as you possibly can, I think, or just about. But there are still men in my life that I love. We have to deal with the reality that men exist, and I don't think becoming a war. It is a war, don't get me wrong, but I don't think we can. I don't think we can improve the lot by just saying, we're out of here. And there are two sides. We can't divide the planet into this half and that half. We can't have governments that will only be for women and some that are only for men. And we have to deal with the fact that there are 7 billion of us on this planet, and we're only way that we have figured out how to survive basically without killing each other entirely is through governments. And I've seen, revolutions, and I've listened to the women who've been through. I have a friend who was through the Cuban Revolution. I have a friend now who's living in Venezuela who is she's dying over there. And I think what we have is a system of government that is incredibly flawed. And like Mark Twain said, it's the worst of all possible systems except for the other. But what we have to do is participate in it, because if we don't participate in it, we have no way to change anything. We may change hearts and minds, but we can see how hearts and minds being changed works when it comes to laws. People have been marching in the streets for feminism for 100 plus years, 150, 200 years. And it's made some change. but only in times when the government was amenable to making those change. So if we exclude working within the system of government, we exclude making changes that will affect our lives. We can opt out, we can go live in the woods somewhere, but that's not going to help, you know,
Sure, and I'm
95% of the rest of that.
But I'm not saying that we can't be friends with men,
I
or
can't.
that we don't.
Felicity, I'm sorry. I'm having a real hard time hearing you. You're coming in and out. And
Am I okay with you, like everyone else, or?
You're a bit quiet, but I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
So, I'm not saying that women should, like, you know, like not speak to another male again. But you know, I'm also saying that we should be setting higher standards on like what men we, you know, want to engage with. Like,
Absolutely.
if, for example, like, you know, about 7, maybe 8 months ago, I wrote on Facebook, like, you know, like this status if you watch porn, right? And like all of the men who liked the status, I unfriended, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like making that boundary of, you know, who's like okay to, you know, talk to, and who's okay to interact with, and all of that sort of stuff. And so what I'm sort of advocating is for women to actually sort of, for the lack of the better term, put our foot down and say, you know, actually, you know, you're not okay to do that. You're not okay to say this. You know, we want to reclaim our power again. And we're not going to do that if we, you know, want to focus on, I don't know, getting quotas put in, or to, you know, focus in on like, oh, we've got to, you know, elect a female prime minister. Because like our female prime minister, Julia Gillard, cut the most to family benefits and to childcare than any male leader in our country's history.
But that's one female politician who was working in a system that did not have female values at its heart. What I'm saying is that we need to build the system to include female values, or values that are, there I go being aphasic again, that are pro-woman. And we can't do that by opting out of the system. We can't have the laws that affect our bodies and our lives change unless we are full-throated within the system. And we're watching right now in Australian politics, we're watching the difference in that the Liberals have basically put their foot down and said, this is a he-man, woman-hating club. And they're imploding. And that's because of the political pressures that have been, and they're standing in contrast with Labor and the Greens. Don't get me started on the Greens, but don't get me started on Labor. But in contrast to those who have made the change. And I think we have to work on all, and we have to do what you're talking about. We have to get people out of our lives, or say, this is not acceptable behavior if you want to interact with me. Or you have to, you know, like say to the doctor, you know, you can't say that to me, or, you know, whatever, you know, on the personal level. But we also have to work on all the other levels.
Yeah, I want to point out that the method of protest and sit-ins and all that kind of stuff never actually stopped. What has stopped is media coverage. I've been at huge protests where it was then reported in the news as being a small bunch of rabble-rousers, and they show like the outskirts of it, and they don't show that there was, you know, 20,000 people that turned up.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say we should stop doing it. I think we should continue doing it.
Absolutely.
But we've got to accept that it may not be covered. It may not get any media coverage that will get the word out. So that means that we need to operate in other ways as well as An example would be where you get a women's group that gets the networks with people in politics, and you actually get those one-on-one meetings, and you can talk to, people in positions of power who get to vote on issues and say, this is why it matters. And you can do that background check on them and find out what issues they've stood for in the past. And so you can cater the information to the areas of interest that they hold already. And that's a very, very effective strategy under media censorship.
Yep. I know my personal member is Catherine King, and she has towed the party line, but she's also been amazing in that she is extremely approachable in ways that none of the other members for state and Senate and so on have been, and that is part of her feminism, is to especially talk to the women in her district and be available and provide resources. Like if you need to go copy some things for your protest, Catherine King's office is open. That sort of thing. So you get people in to positions where they can actually facilitate the other things that happen on the local level. And it works both ways. You build up so you can get someone like that in office, and that person in office can then work in the other direction.
So do you if your local member is Catherine King, you live in Ballarat or somewhere around there? Okay. Yeah, Catherine King is an interesting one. I've also got a Labor MP. Thank goodness, actually, because it's just changed. My electorate boundaries changed. I used to be a member of Chisholm, which was Julia Banks. Now it's been now moved to Hotham. Now I'm represented by Claire O someone. Just let me wait a minute, I'll look it up. But she's Labor, and I've felt a significant amount of relief. So I'm look,
well, Banks
probably
isn't going to make it through the last. Well, she's not going to make it, is she? She's resigned.
She's left. She's gone. That's it. So, it's sad, but that's another thing of what the establishment does to women. Despite being Liberal or Labor or the Greens or whatever, if you're a woman and you get into politics, you better girt your loins and you almost have to get a persona of I don't have feelings to survive.
Well, there are differences, though. That's what I'm saying, is that because Labor has worked on and been forced to work on its feminism, the atmosphere for women in labor, according to labor women, is far different than it is for women in the Liberal National Coalition.
So, can I just ask, I'm interested, when did you move here from the States?
20 years ago.
Okay. Okay, so you're as an Australian as anyone else.
I'm as Australian as anyone, and I'm as American as anyone. So I kind of have a foot in both camps, yes.
Yeah, like most Australians tend to, actually, even not born in America, where, we sort of feel part American anyway. I remember when I was a kid, watching far more American TV than Australian. So, but I just wanted to sort of ask because you have that beautiful kind of mixed accent now, so keep that up.
I tried to lose it in the beginning and just sounded like an idiot. It's just never going anywhere.
Yeah, but you've got this nice mix now. It's like when I have a friend who's been in Australia for a long time, and he's originally from Scotland, and he's got this really nice Scottish Australian twang, which I love.
Yeah,
could listen to it all day.
Oh, I've never had anybody say they could listen to me all day, but I've had a few people that I've made give it a good go.
Good on you. Good on you.
No, I think that I don't know. It may be ego, but I think that coming from both sides and being well steeped in both countries gives me some insights into kind of the universality of maybe not universality, and that how in the West we're just born to be imperial. We're just dedicated to the idea. And I've watched Australia in the last 20 years. And when I got here, my jaw dropped when I watched the news on TV, and I heard people say things about politicians that could never be said on television in the US, and comedians making Jesus jokes on the public broadcaster, and I just thought, oh my God, I'm in heaven, But I've watched over this last 20 years, I've watched Australia turn into America, and it is really, really hard to watch as the politics has shifted right, and the misogyny has increased, and it's
I think Australia is very much Americanized since I was a child. I went over to New Zealand, and so I didn't see what was happening until I got back, and then it was like, oh my God, what is this? And I felt like a tourist in my own country, but it's the same thing of seeing the universality of the Western cultural way of thinking. When I was in New Zealand, I saw, the same thing happening, though it began later, when John Key came in, and he's known as the smiling assassin from having worked in the United States on Wall Street. And he brought in the same Americanization of politics, right-wing politics, and, not my taxes, and individuality, and privatization, all of those things.
Yeah.
It sort of used to be 20 years behind Australia, but I would say it's now, really fast approaching the same level that we have here, though there's still a bit more better public health system to some extent. But yeah, it's like it's just spreading, to the UK, Scotland, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand. We're all looking to the US and making some of the same mistakes while we're
God, yes.
some of the positives as well. I just wish we had more better judgment on what we chose to take on board and what we chose to reject.
Unfortunately, I think what's being taken on board is the fact that Trump won and how he won, and that is what the Liberal Party is up to right now. It's full throttle. Okay, we don't disguise the racism because we'll bring it out into the open and make it normal, which will empower people to go full throat, and we'll win elections that way. And they think that'll work here, and I'm afraid it might very easily, because the first thing we saw, of course, when Morrison got in was that, oh my God, immigrants made it ashore. The fear-mongering and the same, let's build a wall mentality popping back up. I really fear that what's happened in England with the Brexit and what happened in the States with Trump is on Australia's radar, is coming. And I don't think Australia has as good a foundation to resist. It doesn't have a Bill of Rights. And the Constitution is so fuzzy, most people don't know what's in it anyway. So I think we really have to be on guard.
Yeah.
The thing that scares me about Australian politics is we don't have freedom of speech, and it seems like many people are believe that the American Constitution applies to us, and it really doesn't.
It doesn't. Mm-mm.
Yeah. But guys, I need to go and do some things. It's been great talking, and I'm sure to come on to another one of these again, I think.
Oh, that's fantastic, Felicity. It's been really interesting talking to you. It's been really good.
Oh, good.
Yeah, thank you. As much as we perceive a little bit differently, there's a lot of overlap there, and the conversation of not actually seeing things exactly the same is far more interesting. It opens up doors. So yeah,
I
really enjoyed the conversation.
I still believe Jermaine Gray should be a saint, but anyway.
Is anybody going on Saturday?
Yeah, Thursday.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to be there. I'm so excited. Oh my goodness. You know, it's been a long time since I've gone to church, so I thought I may as well go. And so yeah, I'm definitely going. If you know anyone else is like, let me know.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to be missing this one, unfortunately, but yeah, enjoy it.
Thank you. I don't think she's going to be handing out some holy water, but we'll see.
Right.
I'm actually a little bit scared about what she's going to be handing out, but I'll reserve my judgment till I see that pamphlet.
Yeah, we'll see. But I'm very excited. So I hope that you have a great rest of the chat, and till next time, we'll chat again soon.
All right.
Yeah,
see you, Felicity.
Have a good day. See ya.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye. Well, that's fun.
It was, yeah. I was going to say something about, you know, President Trump. One of the things I was shocked at was that he managed to get away with refusing the Paris Accord. You know, refusing to get on board with, you know, measures to help climate. You know, for the emissions, and every other country had ratified. The US was the only one that hadn't.
Yep. And that's because what the right knows that we don't is that voting matters, and that they have organized and organized and organized and organized, and they have taken over Congress from the ground up. And that's why I keep saying, you know, the voting is what really makes a difference, because I see it having made all the difference in the US. I mean, that voting is actually turning us into a fascist state because the left didn't get out to vote.
Yeah, well, it's also rigged. You know, there's so many people who don't have the right to vote due to, well, racism is one of the biggest ones. It's being integrated. And
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's okay. You know, and here people think that voting is mandatory, but it's not. It's registering to vote is mandatory. So we get a lot of left-wingers opting out of voting because our left-wing parties are going more and more neoliberal.
Yep. Where you should be, and that's, don't get me started on the systems, because I've got a good hour rant on that. But what happened in the States to have all these voting restrictions is that people didn't vote in the first place, and the right wing got in, started creating gerrymandered districts and so on. So, I mean, if you've got the right to vote, you have to use it or you will lose it. That's just the most basic. And when the thing that destroys Australian democracy the most is pre-selection, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And also just this like I talked to my tattoo artist actually, who is 30 years old, and he said, "Look, most of my generation doesn't understand politics. We tend to just vote for the one that seems like the best slogans have been said on TV and in snippets here and there, or on videos that pop up online. They
Yep.
don't understand the policies, they don't understand the lingo, and nobody is helping them understand it. So, that's worrisome. Even not understanding, how the system itself works on a state and federal level.
That's right. And I've been here 20 years trying to understand it. I've been told I understand it a lot better than most Australians do. By other Australians who say they don't understand it at all.
Yeah. Gosh,
And
I have a hard time getting
and
my head.
it is labyrinthine. It is, yeah.
Yeah. I have a majorly hard time because, I grew up in New Zealand. So I was brought up in the MMP system, which is a completely different system to state and federal. And, not that state and federal is exactly the same between the United States and Australia. There's quite a lot of differences there too. I've had to go out of my way to learn it, and I'm still in learning. I'm certainly not at a point where I feel confident.
Well, that's one of the things that they've done in the US that has changed things, is that when I grew up going to school was just a given. They're trying to take public school away. But when I went to schools, we had civics classes from the very beginning. We learned exactly what the government was. We learned what the Constitution said. And we learned how elections worked and what our Congress was made up of and the three branches and on and on. We were given very detailed instruction in how our government worked.
Good. It's needed.
But that has been, I mean, that's one of the targets that's been taken out of school. Civics classes don't exist anymore.
Right.
You keep people ignorant about how it works and whether or not they can make a difference.
Yeah, I don't know about the schooling system here if they're taught it. I'm assuming.
Oh,
that
they don't need to because it's so, sorry. I was just saying, it's so labyrinthine that the teachers don't understand it. How could they teach you?
Yeah, good point. And I feel like it should be an absolute baseline. I mean, your survival skills in life are the ability to fight on your own behalf.
Yeah.
Your ability to have voice politically and socially, and then your basics of, food, shelter, work, paying bills,
And the right to collect.
Mandatory subjects. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, and the right to collectively organize.
Yes.
Which is being demolished here.
It is. A lot of that is the trans activism that is demolishing spaces like women's spaces, which means that it's undermining feminism, but also the privatization that is separating people into socioeconomic classes.
Yep.
And it's making the old class system actually seem fair comparatively. And we're pretending that there's an everyman concept here, that we don't have socioeconomic striation, which we very much do.
Yeah. Well, there are also laws being written to criminalize protesting.
Oh my goodness, you're right. Yeah, that had totally slipped my mind. But yeah, just basic protest, that would be a right. Yet somehow we're looking at a situation where they're saying, no, you can't do that.
And it's going to be so much easier here to do that than it would be in the States. I don't know about New Zealand. Because the Constitution really is a brilliant document, but it's obviously very flawed. But the right to assemble, the right to free speech, those things are like paramount in the very beginning. And so you can't take those, you can make laws, but they can also be challenged. Here you can't challenge those laws because there's there's nothing to back it up.
Yeah, New Zealand is extremely similar. It does have a constitution. Most people aren't aware of that over there. When it comes to the right of assembly, there is it's not exactly the same as the United States. There are some rights there. However, should it block a person's passage, those are the words used, meaning that should anyone find it difficult to get crowd,
So
then
yeah,
the police can break up that crowd. Now, that's an extremely easy situation for the police to use, which means that the right to protest and assemble isn't necessarily actually there.
right.
Then when freedom of speech, New Zealanders do not have freedom of speech. What they have is freedom of political speech. So if you can point to a recent political debate, any kind of issue in politics or law, then you can speak. But otherwise, you can in fact be arrested if you can't draw the source to prove your right to speak.
Do you know what those laws are in here as far as speech is concerned? I've had
We have
people tell
something.
me that there is something in the Constitution, but
Yeah, we also have the right to political speech. So again, we have, in theory, we can speak, provided we can source the reasons why we're allowed to speak on a topic, and that's got to be politically relevant. However, most people don't know that. And it's also not really exercised, we don't find people getting arrested for speaking, but it is potentially possible it could happen.
well, there's a case in point within the group.
There is. Yes.
Not arrested, but I would have liked to have seen that go to court. But that's me talking for someone else's life, and that's not fair. I understand that. But it was a situation that really would have tested the boundaries.
Well, it's not over yet. She seems to have won the first round of stuff, but there's more stuff. And, she's under gag order at the moment, so she's questioning that, and her lawyer's looking into it.
Oh.
So, the ability for her to actually get support from us is curtailed at the moment, which is frustrating, not just for her, but I think it's frustrating for everyone who's following this, who wants to do something about it and to actually help her win this, long term and set a precedent.
I just can't see how it cannot implode on itself. But then again, I've watched Donald Trump become president, so nothing's impossible. But
yeah, that Bridget person is actually doing this to somebody else now as well, a man in Melbourne. And I don't know if there's any gag order going on with that or not. So I'm not sure, where it's progressed. I know that he didn't respond to the first the bullshit that this person took to the Human Rights Commission. But I don't know if that response is going to be good enough long term.
Well, we'll find out eventually, maybe.
Yeah, I'm hoping that because it's the same person who's gone to the Human Rights Commission over basic opinion from two different people in two different parts of Australia, that this will actually out Bridget as being somebody who is a troublemaker abusing power.
Well, what I would like to see is the board, whatever, I can't remember what it's called. I would like to see them investigated for letting this go on. I would like to see their brief challenged to because the utter ridiculousness of it, if it was known to the rest of Australia, would peak trans the entire country, actually.
It probably would, especially when you look at, the UN Charter of Human Rights, which actually includes the right to fight on your own behalf politically, which is all that's actually happened with both of these people, is they've spoken about human rights to their own groups and groups that matter to them. And it happens to be a different opinion to the person who is making these claims of harassment. And so here we've got the Human Rights Commission siding with one person over the other two and allowing this investigation when it should have been tossed out, because both sides are fighting for human rights as they understand it.
And both sides were uttering political speech.
Yes.
Because it is political speech.
It is.
It's about the definition in law of who is who. Who's male, who's female, whose rights trump whose. And the fact that the Human Rights Commission didn't see that means they should be investigated.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in agreement with that.
That might be a route that we can take around the gag ordering in the future.
I have asked the person concerned to keep us updated that, you know, her lawyer is looking into this gag order and whether it still applies now that the decision has been reached in her favor in this first round of bullshit thrown at her by this person.
Yeah.
So as soon as she knows whether it's, you know, applies or not, or what rights she has to speak, then we can find out if that's an avenue. I think at this stage it's better to just let her lawyer work on where her rights sit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Because my fear would be that we'd jump in with these great ways of going about it, but then somehow she ends up wearing it.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's got to be through lawyers, unfortunately, but it has to be, because if it's personal, exactly what you're saying could happen. But we're trying to change a structure.
Yeah.
And that requires lawyers.
Requires lawyers to decipher what can and cannot be done. You know, really negative impact on one person who was really just spoken. That's literally all she did, was speak an opinion.
And say, you're not who you say you are.
Yeah.
That's all. And I could say that to anybody in any other context, and it's not an issue.
No, it's not. Right, so it's almost 4 o'clock here. I'm guessing it's still 4 o'clock here as well. And I reckon it's time to round up. My mum's birthday, so I'm going to take her out for coffee and cake later.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
I'm just turning a cup of show up in front of me. I think that's a signal that that she wants me off the computer.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah.
All right. Well, it has been a lovely chat, and I've missed a lot of them, but I'm really glad I came in this time. And
yeah, we'll get it, you know, happening more regularly and more people joining in, and, you know, get a lot more perspectives going on with time.
Sounds good. All right. Talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks for joining me.
And thank you.
So it's the 5th live stream event with Australian Radical Feminists. Our next live stream event will be on Thursday the 6th. It will be happening at 5:30 p.m. in Western Australia, 7 p.m. in Northern Territory and South Australia, 7:30 p.m. for Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania. Over in Aotearoa, New Zealand, that will be at 9 p.m. And for any international who'd like to join us, that will be at 9 a.m. GMT. So you'll need to translate from there. Okay, so speak to you all on Thursday. Thanks. Bye.